All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's March Nature and You lecture. My name is Jeff Ben. I'm the Education Associate at Tuleyome. If you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit based in Woodland, California. Our mission is to engage in advocacy and active stewardship with diverse communities to conserve, enhance, restore, and enjoy the lands in the region. The region that we focus on is the northern inner coast range and neighboring areas of the Central Valley. In particular, we focus on the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which we recently helped lead the effort to expand. In addition to our public lands advocacy work, we also do a variety of education programming, including K-12 field trips, writing natural history pieces in local newspapers and in our newsletter, and of course, this monthly lecture series. We also run a range of adventures programs, including hikes, trail building days, wildflower tours, and our youth boot bank, which provides free loans of hiking boots to kids. We've got a number of events in all those categories coming up in the next month. I've got some of those dates up on the screen for you. And so if you want to join us for any of those, I encourage you to go check out our events page and sign up. On to tonight's lecture. Tuleyome is supported in large part by donations from folks like you. So if you haven't already done so and are in a position to be able to do so, we greatly appreciate a donation to help support the good work that we do. And so tonight we are very lucky to have Tracy Cline and Julia Clickard from the Clear Lake Environmental Research Center, or CLERC, as our speakers for tonight. Tracy is the CLERC Stewardship Director. She has a bachelor's in wildlife and natural resource management from Humboldt State, nearly 30 years of experience caring for Northern California's diverse ecosystems. Julia is a biologist with CLERC. She earned her bachelor's in ecology and environmental biology from UC Santa Cruz. And tonight they're going to be introducing us to CLERC and then discussing their work on Mediterranean oak borer. During the talk, we ask that you hang on to any questions that you have, keep yourself on mute, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. All right, with that, Tracy and Julia, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Tracy Cline. I'm the Stewardship Director for Clear Lake Environmental Research Center, and I'm going to be presenting the first part of our presentation tonight, which is essentially an overview of our organization and the type of work that we're doing in our community. And I like to think of CLERC as a grassroots success story. So let me tell you more about that. So let me briefly tell you what is on the agenda for the evening. I'm going to talk to you about who CLERC is and how did we get here. I'm going to highlight our partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the landscape level restoration projects that we are doing on the Mendocino National Forest, also within the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. The projects that we've worked on with the Forest Service include roadside hazard tree abatement projects, as well as restoration projects within the high severity burn areas of the North Shore Restoration Project planning area. It's a 40,000 acre planning area, and we are taking a phased approach to acquiring grant funding to do implementation. Then I'll tell you a little bit about the monitoring programs that CLERC has initiated this year. And then last but not least, my colleague Julia Clickard will be sharing with you a little bit more detailed information about a new pest in California, the Mediterranean oak borer. And it's one that I feel strongly everyone should be aware of. And hopefully if we all come together and take action early, we'll be able to mitigate some of the catastrophic loss that I expect to see from this species. Let's start with who is CLERC. CLERC serves as a steward for environmental and economic sustainability of Clear Lake, its neighboring lands and waters, local communities, and beyond. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we were founded in 2014. We are a small but growing organization, and we currently have 11 employees, 9 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. We're located in Lakeport, California, in Lake County, obviously. We often serve as a collaborative umbrella organization to assist partners with fuel mitigation and forest health related activities. For instance, we might get a grant and issue subawards to local organizations to implement defensible space work. Just one example. We have multiple hats, but we also have a water quality testing lab. I won't be speaking on that tonight, but I'll be focusing primarily on the fire and forestry component of what we do. So let me start by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about my background. I'm currently the Stewardship Director for CLERC, but I spent the last 3 years as the Fire and Forestry Program Manager, helping to build this program and implement the projects that we got funded with state and federal funding. I've worked for the Forest Service. I worked for the Forest Service as a district wildlife biologist for 10 years. I also worked for Santa Clara County Parks as a natural resource specialist for 8. I was a professor of environmental science and environmental biology at De Anza College. I was supervisory natural resource specialist at the BLM Ukiah field office. Actually, when Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument was expanded and adopted in 2016. And I was the associate resource planner for the Lake County Community Development Department. So with all that, I have extensive experience in public land management, and typical projects that I've worked on include timber harvest, grazing, watershed restoration, prescribed burning for ecological restoration, threatened and endangered species management, wildlife and botanical surveys, weed management, and of course the ominous CEQA and NEPA. And I am a certified wildland firefighter. I also have credentials as a resource advisor and an agency representative for both U.S. Forest Service and BLM. So how did we get here? And what's the story? What's the background here? So Lake County between 2015 and 2020, if you look at this map here on your screen, you will see all of these fires burned within, including the August complex, within a 5-year period. And most of these fire scars are high severity burn. And so we have lost a tremendous amount of habitat, and we have a tremendous amount of fuel loading on our landscapes of standing dead vegetation, trees, logs and trees that don't break down quickly in a landscape, especially in a drier, a more xeric environment. So here you can see, obviously we have a lot of experience with fires here in Lake County. These are our communities here. And this is often what we see after the fires go through everything. The landscape is completely denuded of vegetation, and oftentimes we're looking at a complete restart of that ecosystem. So we're trying to do our part to improve safety, forest health, and fire resilience in our community. So it's these catastrophic wildfires that sparked these grassroots efforts towards fire resiliency and forest health. And I had to put one of my favorite quotes in here because I feel as though it's very true. Anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." And I believe wholeheartedly in that. In our community, we call people who step up to help with things that need to happen in the community spark plugs. And those are the folks that tend to make things happen. So we'd like to consider ourselves spark plugs as well, individually as people, but also as an organization. So CLERC was founded in 2014, as I mentioned, and the primary focus was on environmental research around Clear Lake. And then in 2015, the Valley Fire hit Lake County really hard, and it forever changed our relationship with wildfire. We lost 1,300 homes in one night, and we're a very rural, disadvantaged, and often severely disadvantaged community. So recovery costs are astronomical, and most of our citizens just they can't afford to do the kind of work that is required to recover after a wildfire. So CLERC immediately established the Fire and Forestry Program and began applying for grants to support the recovery and resiliency efforts in our communities. So I'll tell you a little bit about the types of projects that we engage in and the partners that we are working with. I had to put the monument in here, of course. We immediately started working with CAL FIRE, local fire protection districts, fire safe councils, and landowners to develop grant applications. We were very strategic in our approach to what types of projects we wanted to fund, understanding that as a community, we were really in a state of triage. And the idea that so much of our land base had burned in such a short period of time, as well as, the constant reminders that everywhere you go, there's massive amounts of standing dead timber. There's massive amounts of shrubby regrowth in those areas, and that we are a rural community, and most of our homes are in close proximity to open space. And so we had to be very strategic about what type of projects we wanted to focus on, and we decided to really try and focus on what was going to lead to the greatest good for the whole community. So one of our first projects were strategic community fuel breaks. And here's an example. This is one of our most densely populated communities or neighborhoods in Lake County. And here you can see a fuel break that goes throughout. And if you look over here, it goes all the way around, actually. These are around the Mount Canocti area, or what they call the Riviera subdivisions. And some of these fuel breaks were actually put in by CAL FIRE. Some of them were put in during wildfire response, and some of them were put in strategically to protect the community. These communities, I should say, have one road in and out. And a lake on one side. And even during an evacuation, it takes hours to get out of there because everyone's trying to traverse go through the same channels. So we really felt like the only way to help manage the situation is to put in those strategic fuel breaks and then start committing some time and money to evacuation route readiness and roadside mitigations. One of the things we learned in the Valley Fire was that in a massive fire like that, it creates its own weather and the winds shift. And we found that people who were trying to evacuate were actually becoming surrounded by fire because they couldn't tell which way it was blowing. And it was terrifying. And so we learned through experience that one of the most important things we can do is make sure that our roads are open so that people can get in and out of these areas safely. We also focus on the fire recovery and restoration projects. Those are targeted primarily through forest health grants, working with large-scale landowners to strategically do shaded fuel breaks and forest restoration work, so that if there is another fire in those areas, that we've built some resiliency into those landscapes, and those landscapes are often adjacent to our more populated areas. So we do have some great partners with local landowners that are willing to work with us on getting these projects done because they understand the importance of protecting the community at large. We also do that roadside fuel mitigation and evacuation route readiness that I mentioned. We've also established a countywide chipping program. And we also, as I mentioned earlier, we sometimes issue subawards to local groups. Some of the groups that we would issue subawards to are HOAs and fire safe councils who are the spark plugs in their communities and have all the connections with folks in those communities to help implement chipping programs on a smaller scale. And so the countywide chipping program is really, it's available to anybody outside of those jurisdictional areas where those chipping programs have already been funded. So pretty much anyone in Lake County can call or submit a request on our website, and we will arrange a time and day for a dedicated fuels crew, Lake County dedicated fuels crew, to go out and chip the material that they've cut on their landscape to reduce fuel loading. And then, like I mentioned that before, we have forest health projects, and those are on private and public lands, including the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument or Mendocino National Forest. Here's some examples of some of the strategic fuel breaks that we've worked on. We work closely with CAL FIRE. Again, many of these were initiated during wildfire response action, and we have come back in with grant funding, oftentimes from CAL FIRE, to actually maintain these and expand them where it's deemed appropriate to do so. For instance, in some of these areas, I'm not sure I have a slide that depicts it very well, but adjacent to many of these lands, these ridge lines are some of our more concentrated residential areas, immediately adjacent to a wilderness area, BLM wilderness area. And so we're working closely with BLM and Forest Service to try and maintain and continue to expand on these strategic field breaks to protect the community. We lose homes in Lake County every year to fire, and our goal is to mitigate that to the best of our ability so that that is no longer our statistic. Uh-oh. Okay, well, this slide, let me see if I can go back to that slide. I'm sorry. See if it'll come up for me. There we go. Okay, so to help keep our community and our funders informed, we do have a project dashboard on our website. You can find it if you go to the CLERC.org, Community Projects Project Dashboard. And these are all of the projects that either have been completed or are in progress or are funded under grants that have been awarded to CLERC. This side over here will tell you about each of the grants and what they are funding. Over here, we've broken down the acreage to be treated by fire protection district. And over here, again, we have the grants and how many acres they'll be treating. So in total, in less than 10 years, if we implement all of these projects, we will have treated almost 10,000 acres in Lake County with our small little nonprofit. So I put this on here as well because I want you to take a look at this section right here, this cluster of polygons. These are the projects that we're working on in the National Forest on the Upper Lake Ranger District. And these are all areas that burned in the 2018 Mendo Complex or Ranch Fire. And again, Nice and Lucerne are some of our densely populated communities just below that. So again, our primary focus is protection of our communities. And then beyond that is forest health and fire resiliency so that the next fire that comes through will not be a catastrophic stand replacing wildfire again. So I had to put this in. This is something we're very excited about. We are working closely with the U.S. Forest Service to restore the southern end of the Upper Lake Ranger District, which burned in the 2018 Mendo Complex, which I mentioned. This is a photo of our small little fire and forestry team who took a sojourn out to the Placerville Nursery in Camino a couple weeks ago to retrieve 21,000 conifer seedlings that are going to be planted in the National Forest this spring. We are working with a group called PROPS, which stands for Patriot Resource Operations. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting veterans transitioning from military service to civilian life. They are excellent operators, equipment operators, and they're very knowledgeable in their application of forestry practices. And we're thrilled to be able to work with them and to support their mission. Okay, my screen is frozen. I'm so sorry. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So I mentioned that we've been working with the National Forest. This is our 2019 Fire Prevention Grant, which is a hazard tree abatement project. As you can imagine, with all of the timber that burned in the National Forest during those fires, access became quite limited, and it wasn't very safe to be out on the forest or even driving through the forest. We had trees coming down on the road constantly. So we entered into an agreement with the Forest Service, and we were able to clear hazard trees 200 feet on both sides of the road in the fire impacted areas, which resulted in over 500 acres being treated. And this was completed between 2021 and 2023 with an investment of over $1 million on the National Forest for that project. Here's some after photos. That before photo showed you, while all the trees that were really congested along the roadway. And this should hopefully highlight, there's still a ton of dead material out across that landscape. All of that gray is standing dead trees, big trees too. It's really unfortunate. But these are the roads that you can use to access it. And if you see, there's a nice swath on both sides of the road where of course, any green trees were retained, but where we don't have to worry now if a windstorm or any kind of weather event is going to lead to more and more trees on the road and increased hazardous conditions out there. A lot of the trees that were taken down were piled to be burned, and I'd like to report that last week the Forest Service successfully burned a whole bunch of these. So if anybody saw any smoke up on the National Forest, that's what was going on. And the reason they are burning these is because we have another project where we're getting ready to replant it with those 21,000 seedlings. And so the phase 1 forest health project is these units here, this teal color. Now, these were the remaining green islands that existed after the burn. So our goal is to get in there, thin it, and the idea is to prep it so that the Forest Service can actually do a prescribed understory burn and ensure that these areas are again going to be resilient to wildfire, the next wildfire. And for this project, we had $1,362,000-ish investment in the Mendocino National Forest. I would like to also mention that as part of this, we did conduct a climate change adaptation study with researchers from UC Davis, who actually provided us, they were looking at future climate on those slopes, and it had to do with those specific locations of soil, slope, aspect, and previous vegetation on the landscape. And they provided us with some very clear planting instructions, color-coded, easy to read and understand planting instructions that say, replant what was here and do not plant what was here. And in most cases, what you will see is a transition, in some cases, away from planting conifers, but allowing natural regeneration of oaks. And that's an important piece of this project. It's, while we do have some plantations in there that we're going to be planting, the North Shore Restoration Project is just that. It's a restoration project. So traditionally, the Forest Service may have been looking at replanting plantations with the sole purpose of growing logs and growing timber. But in this particular project, they're looking at things in a much more ecological lens, and they are focused on what is the best, what's the best vegetation for that landscape long term in in the face of climate change and what's we anticipate is going to continue to change with our climate. The phase 2 portion of this project, we have just initiated. This is the one we're working with props, and we're going to be planting. We'll actually be planting this area right here in a couple of weeks. So we're very excited about that. But these are the orange units are plantation units, and the green ones are not plantation units, but they're also going to be replanted. And again, this is focused on the high severity burn areas. There's very little remaining green vegetation on that landscape. We are seeing some recovery from manzanita and other shrub species, but even that is coming very slowly. So this is a multi-phase project. It includes site prep, biomass removal, such as pile burning, decking, and in some cases, we may be looking at turning some of those logs into biochar. And the project itself will ultimately plant 232,000 new conifer seedlings on the landscape. But like I mentioned before, the planting is not just going to be cut everything down and plant trees in rows. It's going to be looking at what's there, what's regenerated naturally on its own, what's doing well, and then spacing off of those individuals to plant these additional trees. In total, this project encompasses 1,065 acres of high severity burn and includes a $7 million investment in the Mendocino National Forest or the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. Here's a few photos from the field, working with our Forest Service partners, coming up with our plan of attack and how we're going to implement these projects, and a few more. And if you look back here, you can see on this landscape, this is the hazard tree project here, and you can see all of these piles that were recently burned. So in total, our partnership with the Forest Service has, we've been awarded $9,369,549 from various grants, primarily from CAL FIRE. And we also were awarded almost $18 million from the U.S. Forest Service Washington office through the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, that people know it as the CWDG. There's some uncertainty right now because of that federal funding. There's some uncertainty about whether or not that is going to continue to be available to us, but we certainly hope so, because we have really seen this partnership between the state and the federal governments working together to restore both the federal and private lands in these regions. They are recognizing that the more they invest in the community doing this work, the better off they will be long-term, and so will the outcome for these catastrophic wildfires. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you to our partners, but I'm not sure why my photos are loading so slow. Okay, there we go. And then from that, I'm going to transition into talking about our monitoring programs. These are relatively new to CLERC. We started these this last spring, and we have established a new wildlife monitoring program, which includes wildlife cameras in our project sites to gather pre and post project data. We have a herp migration monitoring program, which I'll go into a little bit more in the next slide. And then we have a mob monitoring program, and that is Mediterranean oak borer. And there's linked to all of these on our website. But this photo right here is from one of our wildlife monitoring cameras. And I like to call this little mama right here Goldilocks. But this female here has, count them, 1, 2, 3 babies trailing her through one of our project areas. And actually one of our next photos on this reel with the camera was like, because the bears found it and were like, hey, what are you? Ah. As they tend to do, which is fun to see, of course. So with our wildlife monitoring projects, I wanted to be clear that before we do anything, we do extensive pre and post project surveys, including wildlife plants and nesting bird surveys. We have these monitoring programs have been developed to monitor wildlife use within our project areas. Of course, you know, with the amount of fuel mitigation work that's happening, there's always a concern that as we treat one area, we're pushing wildlife out of those areas and into adjacent areas. And so to really have a good handle on what wildlife is utilizing those spaces and maintaining their territories within those areas, we wanted to just really get a handle on what happens pre and post, and are we going to continue to see the same animals, and are they going to maintain their territories in these areas? In this photo, you can see this is a mountain lion, and this is the same property that the bears were photographed on, very near where the bears were photographed as well, actually. And then we do recognize that vegetation removal can impact individual animals. We do our best to make sure that we have minimal impacts on all species, but especially nesting birds or denning species during the time of year when that activity is taking place, we try to be extra cautious, and our goal is to minimize those impacts by avoiding nests, dens, and overwintering sites for all wildlife. So in regards to our monitoring migration pathways, we do this for our forest dwelling species that exhibit high site fidelity, such as turtles, newts, toads, frogs, and salamanders. And the reason we do this is we happen to know there's new data out there, not so new data as well, that suggests that these species actually return to very closely to the same location every winter to overwinter. And I know this to be true with turtles. I conducted a telemetry study on Western pond turtles when I worked for the Forest Service, and our data showed that our turtles were returning to the exact same bush that they were burying themselves and overwintering under every year. So knowing that, and knowing that wildfire mitigation work could detrimentally impact these species, we decided to start doing this migration monitoring, because if we know where they're crossing the roads to their breeding grounds, we actually know where they overwintered. And if we have that data, then we can be extra careful in our application of our fuel mitigation work. And so we tend to we like to recruit the community, because these are their backyards. They know where these activities are happening. And so on our website, there's a form that the neighbors, residents can fill out when they see newts migrating or toads migrating or turtles migrating. And if they share that information with us, we'll go out and do some more surveys, put up some cameras, and really get a sense of where the wildlife is coming from. Newts in particular will often overwinter together. And so you may find some really nice colonies of these newts. And so, yeah, our goal is to do as little harm as possible while also trying to get to a point of forest resilience and fire resilience with our community. So knowing where these animals come from, it allows us to make mindful and informed decisions about roadside fuel mitigation projects. And the next monitoring program that we kicked off this year is the pest monitoring program. And it is because of the presence of the invasive Mediterranean oak borer in Lake County. And it led us to develop a community reporting page on our website so that citizens can participate in the assessment and management of the pest locally. And we're working closely with the Lake County Tree Mortality Task Force to spread awareness and to develop a comprehensive action plan. And again, this is on our website. And with that, I'm going to introduce Julia Clickard, and she's going to talk to you more about that particular project. Julia joined CLERC last April. She's originally from San Luis Obispo County, and she has a BS in Ecology and Environmental Biology from UC Santa Cruz. And she's worked on a variety of wildlife and terrestrial and aquatic wildlife species projects. And she is going to be presenting on the details of MOB, and she manages our monitoring programs. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Julia, go ahead and take it from there.
Thank you so much for the intro. Okay, is that up? Okay. Hello, I'm Julia, the newest biologist at Clear Lake Environmental Research Center. I'm going to present our Mediterranean oak borer action plan, which includes identification and just a lot of general information we've gathered about how we, as a community, can address its impact. I do want to note that Mike Jones, Curtis Ewing, and UCNR have been incredible resources in the creation of this action plan. Generally, this presentation will cover 4 major topics: tree symptoms, which you'll see in the field or on local property; mob information, specifics on the beetle and its life cycle; wooding material treatment, what to do with downed branches and wood; survey and outreach, CLERC's reporting system, other resources, and our plan moving forward. First of all, let's talk about the Mediterranean oak borer and how it impacts trees. Its scientific name is Xyloborus monographus, but for this presentation, we're shortening down Mediterranean oak borer to mob to save us a little bit of time. The most prominent question about mob is, how will we be able to tell if a tree has it? This information is vital in identifying an outbreak when it first begins. Here are the main symptoms to look for. Black trellis system in the shallow layers of the tree, the xylem. Tiny circular holes in the bark. Pale boring dust around the holes or at the base of the tree. Patchy dieback starting from the tips of the branch and moving down. Now, please keep in mind that there are other stressors that can cause similar changes in a tree. Water stress, especially after hot summers, can cause large amounts of browning or dying areas within trees. Climate change, heat, fires, these can impact trees in a similar fashion. High winds can physically damage trees and branches, opening wounds or killing off small sections. And of course, there are other pests or diseases, such as sudden oak death or bark beetles. The best way to check for mob are to look for the symptoms previously mentioned. Black trellis systems, tiny circular holes in the bark, pale boring dust, and patchy branch dieback. So, let's see the biology and life cycle of mob. This is the identification of both the actual insect itself, as well as its life cycle and impact. Mob is a small reddish-brown beetle. As you can see in these images, its coloration can vary between individuals and sexes. These insects are very small and are rarely spotted during inspections unless the tree is physically cracked open to see the galleries. One way to differentiate it from other oak borers and ambrosia beetles are these small raised bumps on the backs of the elytra. It's a hard covering that protects the flight wings of females. Right here. While females have those bumps, there are also other sexually dimorphic characteristics between female and male mob. The females are notably larger, closer in size to pencil lead, and capable of flight. Males, on the other hand, are smaller and flightless, but feature this rhinoceros horn right here. Now, onto its eggs and general life cycle. A single unmated female can be the start of an infestation. When she arrives on a new branch or tree, she begins to lay unfertilized eggs that will develop into males. She can then mate with the males to produce fertilized eggs that will develop into yet more females. Females continue to expand galleries and mate until they leave the parent gallery system to attack the same host tree or a new tree, begin the cycle once more. Now, within those trees, each can house 2 to 3 generations of mob. It takes about 5 to 8 weeks to develop from egg to adult, which means they can have 2 or more generations within 1 year. Now, they do have a period of general inactivity. In California, with our climate, mated females overwinter within their galleries, and then during their peak emergence period, after late winter or spring, about when the temperature can reach 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Generally, our safest estimate of their inactive period is between November and January. This is the period where we want to take down infested trees, branches, or move its woody material. The peak is between March and May, which is the most dangerous time to prune or move the material. Now let's look at their actual impact on trees. When they burrow, their galleries appear in these black trellis shapes that connect with each other. Mob move from the tip of the branch all the way down to the trunk. They rarely split off to go back up an uninfected branch they passed by. As the mob move down the branch or trunk, their galleries become even more crowded and well developed, eventually cutting off water flow and, ultimately, girdling the tree. That's not the only danger the galleries possess. The black colors originate from the fungus that they cultivate. Now, all ambrosia beetles have fungal associations. Mob is generally associated with Raphaelia and Fusarium in both its native range and in California. Female mob carry these fungi in pockets, mycantia, above the mandibles. When a female attacks a new host, it inoculates the tree with a fungus, which spreads to the tree's xylem or sapwood. The female can also pick up hitchhiking pathogens that can establish in the tree during that excavation, further weakening the tree. Mob is native to Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. In its native range, mob has a wide variety of oaks that attacks, as well as several non-oak species, such as maple, walnut, beech, elm, cherry, chestnut, and hornbeam. Notably, mob only attacks extremely distressed and already dying trees within its home range. Now, let's look at how it can impact our county and local areas. Well, it has some preferred habitat characteristics. We can see that it favors elevations below 1,500 feet, but can tolerate 1,500 to 2,000 feet. Lake County has an enormous range in elevation from 640 feet, which is easily in its habitat range, to 6,900 feet. But what we should consider is that mob is almost exclusively found in oak-dominated stands. California oak woodlands range from 500 feet to 3,000 feet, a perfect range for mob in Lake County. Unlike in Europe, mob is much more specialized on the West Coast. It generally most commonly attacks white oak, more specifically valley oak, in California, while the California black oak has only seen a single tree affected in extremely limited attack. How does this impact us? Well, here's a list of the more common oaks within Lake County, and let's reference it against species that mob attacks in California. As we can see, all 4 species are found within our county. This is a wonderful map created by the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources, UCANR, on their website for monitoring oak borer. It took years to estimate exactly how long mob has been in California, but now we can see the enormous jump in affected area between 2021, 2023, and just last year, 2024. In just the last year, its distribution has grown to encompass most of Lake County. So, yes, it's definitely a danger and a lot closer than we'd like. Now there's a big question of what can we do if we do suspect mob? As with any integrated pest management plan, there are a number of ways to address the problem directly and indirectly. One of the biggest steps is prevention. That's what we're hoping to do right now. That's spreading information and awareness of what to look for and what practices are currently being used to deal with mob. We've gone over what to look for, so let's look at control and treatments. Pruning of infested tree limbs could be viable, although it's currently unknown how far the fungus spreads beyond mob galleries. Once the mob infestation reaches the trunk of the tree, pruning limbs will not remove it, so you have to act early. The infestation will move downwards from its initial point. You'll want to take pictures of the branch before it loses its leaves in order to help identify which branch needs to be pruned when winter comes. The branch must be pruned all the way up to the trunk in order to be effective. Avoid moving the woody material after cutting, and treat the material in order to stop the mob from dispersing to other nearby trees. As for treating the wood, once finished pruning or removing infested wood, chipping is a frequently used option, since it can work with a lot of material and you can treat the wood right after chipping. Any handling or moving of firewood should be done during the low activity period of mob, again between November and January. The chips should be 1 inch or less in diameter. Any larger and it's just not as effective at killing them. Please avoid moving after cutting. Remember, a single unmated female could start infestation, so by moving chips, it could create a whole new infested area. There are 4 main treatments for mob right now, although recent research and efforts have shown that some are more effective than others. The 4 treatments that we'll go over are burying, solarization, burning, and heat treatment. First of all, burying. Of the woody debris treatments, burying is not really recommended. The wood would need to be buried deep enough that the beetles could not see light to escape, so at least 5 inches below the surface. There's also concern about how much soil will have to be disturbed, since there's a lot of woody material to dispose of. Next, solarization. Solarization uses tarps to expose the woody material to the sun's heat over a long period of time in order to kill off the fungus and mob. While this was the recommended one for the last couple of years, it is no longer considered effective or practical, since it won't work unless vented with fine stainless steel mesh of 1 millimeter or less, or else there's just too much water in there and the mob survives. It is also no longer recommended by Oregon for that reason. Then burning. This is helpful because burning can occur during the key winter months where mob is dormant. Burning can also be performed with portable incinerators on site, which provides flexibility with treating numerous trees and reduces the risk of spread since you don't have to move the wood. Finally, heat treating wood is a possible option for firewood, since it's already used when transporting firewood or other woody materials long distances, such as with building materials. Um, it helps prevent the spread of diseases or pests. You want a minimum of 140 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 minutes when treating the wood. It's achievable by a broad range of firewood kilns and available even if the climate or season would prevent solarization or burning. Using kilns to treat wood means that it doesn't necessarily need to be chipped either, bypassing that step. Now the next step of management. Early detection. Locals know their area the best. You see it every day, you see the changes and what looks wrong. That's why early detection depends on recruiting community members and creating an easy source of reporting and learning about what to do when you do find mob. Our main method of early detection is the project page and survey on our website. We created this with the intent of being an easy accessible source of information for the community, as well as allowing us to take a rough survey of affected trees. We can then follow up on submitted information, assess infestation severity, and provide the resources UCNR and other local and state monitoring programs. You can find the mob monitoring project on our homepage right here under projects. Our biological technician, Hannah Shapiro, and our operations outreach coordinator, Rachel Villa, did an incredible job of putting together the website, dashboard, and survey that we're going to see. Below the informational sections about mob, there are 2 buttons near the bottom of the page. The first button will lead to our mob survey dashboard. In a short summary of this page, here's a basic blurb about mob along with a link to the project website. This graph shows how many reports have been submitted over time. This little legend shows what the colors of the heat map mean, with colder bluer colors showing a higher concentration of mob sightings. This is the actual map. You can zoom in and out and scroll around the county. Finally, this column on the far right shows some basic information about each point on the map. Let's go back to the project page. The second button leads to the survey. Overall, this survey is meant to be an early warning reporting tool that the community can access. It asks for some basic information such as date and location of the mob-infested tree, as well as some questions about if you've seen specific symptoms. Ultimately, it's meant to keep our communities informed and share what we have gathered with the local and state agencies. We hope to pair this mob survey with another form of early detection, tracking the transport of firewood or woody materials. We've already contacted local forest management professionals in order to start up this program, but we're always looking for more contacts. Generally, we hope to use something similar to the mob survey to track where firewood or downed woody material is being transported. The end goal is that we can compare those results against where mob is spreading to see if there's a definite link and what the community can do to help prevent it. On the subject of community, here are numerous agencies that we're currently working with. It's been incredible for helping spread this program, and of course, we are always looking for more groups. We're currently working with Mike Jones and Curtis Ewing to create short, free training seminars for both professional and the general public. For arborists or forestry management, trainings would include information on the signs and symptoms of mob, as well as how to mitigate the spread of work sites. For the public, the presentation would focus on the signs and symptoms, how they can protect their trees, and contact information for willing professionals who can identify and treat mob infestations. Overall, our goal is to use the survey and reporting tools to gather data in order to help obtain a grant for management, similar to Oregon's mobile burn unit, or other methods as the situation develops. CLERC is also planning to host a Q&A open house meeting that provides space for the public to speak with professionals about any further questions they have regarding management. And that's it for the presentation. We'll end on an image of a mob beetle that was taken by our team in our very own Lake County. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia and Tracy, for a great presentation. We've got some time for Q&A. So folks in the meeting, you can either raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask verbally, or you can type a question in the chat, and I'd be happy to relay it to our presenters. I can get things started. I've got a whole list of questions here. And so, Julia, sort of a sense of like scale of the mob issue. We kind of showed the geographic map of where it's at. Are we talking hundreds of trees currently infected, thousands? Like, do you have any idea what the scale is now?
I definitely say a lot more than hundreds. Just looking like Tracy was the one who kind of kickstarted this by noticing in her neighborhood, like just in her neighborhood, she suspects like dozens in that area in
Hmm.
Lakeport. So we are currently hoping to help with like trapping and surveying because our biggest worry is if they're able to go at higher elevations, we are really at risk for it spreading a lot.
Yeah, and along those lines, you mentioned that it seems to like the valley oaks quite a bit, but also it can infect white oaks generally. I know probably our most common oak tree in the area would be blue oaks, at least moving eastward from you all. Does it seem to be infecting blue oaks quite a bit, or is that less common?
They're less common. The biggest ones we're definitely seeing are the white oaks, specifically for California, the valley oaks. They think it could
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
the like specific subspecies of mob, but they're currently looking into it because there's it's like so new. There's a lot of research going in.
Yeah. Question from the chat. Do we know anything about predators of mob?
No known predators. I think Kurz Ewing and UCNR are pushing actually to do a lot more study on the fungus right now because
Yeah.
I mean, introducing a predator when we all already have our own beetles here could be very dangerous. So they're hoping to find out how to help stop the spread of the fungus instead, because that's what they use as a food source.
Okay. Um, one more mob question. So you have there's lots of burned dead timber in Lake County, as you mentioned. Is the beetle able to infect and survive in a burned tree, or does it have to be a live tree?
It has to be a live tree because they need that water
Okay.
flow to help cultivate the fungus. I think
Makes sense.
in their home range I was talking about, that's where they really like to get the dying trees. But like here in California, they are targeting healthy, if probably drought stressed trees.
Mhm. All right. So let's see. Question for Tracy. You show the map with all this area, the wildfires over the last 10 years or so, enormous amount of acreage. So how do you prioritize and decide where to go in and do fuel mitigation and restoration projects?
Well, that's a great question, and we've actually tried it a few different ways, and we've gotten to the point now where we're looking for shovel-ready projects, and those
Mm-hmm.
are more likely to be funded, because if the CEQA and NEPA are the hang up for a lot of projects, once it gets funded, you have 1 year to complete your environmental review. And if you're going to do full-fledged surveys a year, it may not be enough time. So it really cuts into your implementation time. So that's part of how we started really working with the National Forest, because they were already in the process of completing their NEPA analysis for the North Shore Restoration Project. And it was litigated and appealed and whatnot. And we knew when they finally got through that process, it was going to be good to go. So we've submitted for several projects, several grants to implement the North Shore Restoration Project on behalf of the Mendocino National Forest. And this also coupled with the fact that they are not getting the kind of funds that they need to actually implement it on their own. So they did all of the analysis, and we feel it's a good investment in the community. And then our next project is actually going to be focusing on the private lands between the National Forest and the communities. And we'll be hopefully drafting or doing a Cal VTP analysis, California Vegetation Treatment Plan, which is an EIR that CAL FIRE did a few years ago, that you can tier your environmental review, your CEQA analysis to. So we'll be hoping to do that on the private lands, and again, thin them, do appropriate fuel breaks, and hopefully that will build another layer of protection into the community buffer between the National Forest and the community. So either way, wherever the ignition starts, that there isn't a continuous ladder fuel and continuous fuel between the homes and the National Forest again.
Right. That's a good segue to another question I had. So putting in all these new fire breaks and that kind of thing, is there any thought or effort to incorporate those breaks into local trail or OHV networks?
No, I haven't really heard any discussion on that point. I suspect that maybe that's something that we could consider in the future. I think we're still kind of just trying to get the basic protections in place
Of course,
and
yeah.
maintaining what has been completed. Although we did have a research associate this last summer, and we were looking at opportunities to minimize our maintenance costs and to lengthen our reentry time periods by utilizing native vegetation that is low growing, that might be able to actually still serve the purpose of a fuel break without it just being bare mineral soil.
Great. All right. Are there any other questions from the audience here? All right. So with that, thank you again, Julia and Tracy. Stay tuned for our next Nature and You lecture coming up on April 24th. That'll be with author Aaron Heyman. We'll be talking about his new book, Birds of the California Delta. And so the recording of this lecture will be up on our YouTube page, hopefully tomorrow, but maybe next week. Yeah, thank you again. It was a great talk.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much.